Well, welcome back to the Sean Spicer Show. It is Friday. We've made it through the week. We've had a great conversation to get you going into the weekend. And I know some of you might not be listening to this live. So hopefully you're either about to have a good weekend or actually having a good weekend. But it's been a rather tumultuous week in Washington, as you know. We're careening towards this government shutdown, the debate, which we broke down yesterday. I mean, what a disaster. Anyway, so today's discussion, I think, is interesting. You might have heard the left meltdown about the hold that Senator Tommy Tuberville has on military promotions. And if you listen to the folks on the left, and I include the folks in the media in that because they're all one and the same, you would think that this guy is single-handedly stopping everyone in the military from being promoted, that national security and readiness are all at risk. But there's more to the story. In fact, the narrative broke down the other day. 3 of these folks were confirmed. We have a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who takes over October 1st from General Mark Milley. We have a new Chief of Staff of the Air Force and a new Commandant of the Marine Corps. Well, how did that happen if Tommy Tuberville was blocking everything? Because the media and the left didn't tell you the whole story. They didn't even tell you why it started. Because it's interesting. They keep saying this is unprecedented. Well, maybe there's more to this about why it actually occurred in the front. Plus, I do want to break down a little bit more about what happened at the debate. We've got a great discussion that Mark Halperin, myself, and Jennifer Nassour, who you saw yesterday, had post-debate. And I want to give you a little bit of an insight into what we talked about right afterwards as well. So a lot to break down as we head into the weekend. Let's get into it. All right, well, I'm excited about my first guest, Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. It's an interesting senator that he has become. He is still known as Coach. He was a longtime coach. You probably recognize the name from the University of Auburn down there in Alabama, but he's also coached at the University of Mississippi, Texas Tech, and the University of Cincinnati. He was historic in his coaching style and well-renowned in the college football world, and then decided to run for the United States Senate in 2020. Well, one of the things that was really interesting is that back in the day, they used to say as a freshman, you are supposed to be spend more time listening than talking. Tommy Tuberville came and made a huge impact right away, but he has been most notably in the news the last several months because he put a hold on all of the military promotions. And I'm not talking the political ones, right? The assistant secretary to this and the comptroller and all that kind of stuff. That actually has happened before. I'm talking all military promotions. So all these guys making flag officer admirals and generals, that's what I'm talking about. These guys literally for the first time, I mean, Tammy Duckworth had done this, the former senator from Illinois at one point, but it was a short period of time to protest Trump. Well, this time, Tommy Tuberville said no, and he's holding firm. We started to get to this point where it was, quote, historic, because Mark Milley was stepping down as the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and C.Q. Brown, well, he was the incoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He'd been the Secretary of the Army, and they weren't letting his promotion move. We were about to have Milley step down October 1 and no full-on replacement. He would have been acting. But this is the case now for the other Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of the Air Force, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Chief of Naval Operations, etc. Tuberville's held all these folks up. Democrats have gone absolutely apoplectic. And if you listen to the media, everything went to a standstill. There was no way that the military could move, and this wasn't their fault. Well, 2 things. It was their fault. They changed the policy. That's what Tuberville started fighting for. Out of nowhere, without consulting Congress, the Defense Department under the Biden administration said that they would give leave up to 30 days for people to go get an abortion. You get 30 days of leave in the military. But now they were going to give you an additional 30 and pay for your travel to go to a state that allowed it. They didn't talk to Congress about this. They didn't ask for anything. They just did it. So all these people kept saying, well, it's historic that Tuberville is holding this up. Well, guess what? It was historic what they did too. But then what was so interesting is the media argument fell apart. The Democrat argument fell apart. They caved Because what they weren't telling you the whole time was that they could promote these guys. They could do it. It's just they had to do it one at a time. And what had happened in the past, they'd done it in block. So you'd taken 5, 10, 20, who knows, how many promotions, put them all together and passed it, usually with unanimous consent. What Tuberville was making them do is say, fine, do it one by one. They hated it. And to read a story about this or listen to the Democrats, you would have thought that he had completely blocked it. But they proved the other day that that wasn't true. Of course, it didn't get any coverage. But Schumer caved and put the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff up for a vote, and he passed. They also put the Secretary of Air Force and the Commodore of the Marine Corps. Now, he just disproved the entire argument that the left and the media is making. Will it take more time? Yes. Is it impossible? No. Has he ground it to a halt? No. The media and the left don't want you to know that that wasn't the truth. And when Schumer caved, he didn't tell anyone, and the media didn't cover it as if that had actually happened. So I'm interested to hear from Senator Tuberville why he started this, where this thing heads in his mind, and the criticism that he's getting both maybe from his colleagues or not, and at home. Without further ado, I want to bring in Senator Tuberville. All right, Coach, welcome to the show. For viewers, explain. Everyone understands these military promotions aren't moving forward, but how did it all start?
Well, it all started because we couldn't get a briefing, Sean. Over a year ago, we heard they were going to change the abortion rule in the military, which we've had the policy for 35 years, voted on in the Senate by Joe Biden and the Democrats. They passed it. It's been great. They've had a few abortions every year, but none of the money's gone and been paid for by the taxpayers. But after Roe Wade went down, went back to the states, Joe Biden and his cronies said, hey, we can handle the federal employees. So they did the VA. I fought that. They brought it over for a vote. It passed. So now we have VA abortions. And then they told us they were going to do the military. And so, wait a minute, we've had no problem. And they said, well, we want to change it anyway. So they wanted to do it basically with no abortion at any time, fly the individual to another state wherever they get an abortion, but paid for by the taxpayers. I said, wait a minute, it's against the law. We can't do that. And so I wrote a letter to the SecDef and said, if you do this, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to hold your promotions of your admirals and generals, and I'm not going to change my mind. And so they changed it. So I've been holding it now for 7 months. So, and last week.
So when this happens, you write this letter. Does he call you and say, hey, let me explain to you what's happening? Does he say, let me send one of my aides to brief you? How did the letter get sent, and then what happens?
Nothing. We heard crickets from the Pentagon and the SecDef. And that was in December, around December the 11th of last year. We heard nothing for about a month. And all of a sudden, we hear they're changing the policy. And so they changed it on a date sometime in February. Immediately, we put the hold on, but I never had any conversation with the Pentagon. They were going to do it, hell or high water. And I've really only talked to the Pentagon maybe a total of 10 minutes in the last 7 months, not heard from the White House. They don't want to communicate about it. They're just dictating. And, it's about taxpayer money, and it's about dictating from the White House and the Pentagon. It's got to go through Congress. That's the reason I ran for this position. This controversial issue on abortion needs to be voted on, and with representation in Congress to all the states if you're going to do this. And so that's the reason I fought it. And again, the other thing is about how woke our military is becoming. It is, every day we're losing a little bit of control of our military up here to this radical activist group. And it's just, they've got everything else, and they get the military, Sean, we got huge problems.
So why did you choose to block admirals and generals promotion versus, say, just civil servants, the assistant secretaries and the deputy assistant secretaries, et cetera? Why focus on the career military versus the political?
This is the best way to get their attention. I could have done the civil route, but I don't think that would have been a lot tougher to really get their attention. And I also looked at the admirals and generals, Sean. In World War II, we had 12,000 military personnel. We had 7 4-stars. Today, we have 44. Each 4-star has 1,000 to 2,000 civil employees with a $200 to $300 million budget. And it's out of control. It really is. And again, I'm not saying that we need less, other than the fact that our budget is out of sight in the military. We need to spend more on the people who actually do the war fighting, other than all these generals and admirals that live over in the Pentagon that have a great life.
So for a lot of folks, they're with you on the case. I agree with you. I actually heard Nikki Haley make a really strong defense of the case that they started it, if you will. They changed the policy without asking Congress. That was unprecedented. And then so you did this. But for a lot of folks in the military, they might be saying, okay, I've worked my whole life, 20 something years, and I finally make flag officer, I make general officer, and now I'm being cast as a pawn in this political fight. How is that fair?
Well, the big thing is, Sean, I'm holding up the group at one time. I'm not holding up individual noms. And
so explain that. Explain what that, because that's important. Explain what that means.
Well, I told them I was going to hold them up as a group. The military is the only one that basically they come and to the Senate and say, okay, we got 300 or 400 people that we want to give a promotion to. And normally we just pass it on, do a UC and a voice vote, and they're promoted. And I told them if they did this policy, I was going to force them to go one at a time. Again, they can do these noms one at a time. I'm not holding them up. I'm just holding up the 300 or 400 at one time, to where I'm making Congress work, basically. Right. I'm making Chuck Schumer actually bring them to the floor. And last week I forced him to bring 3 of them to the floor. And I showed everybody, listen, he can do this. He just doesn't want to do it.
But that's the thing that I think is interesting. And I was commenting on this before you came on. The way that the media and the left portray this is Senator Tommy Tuberville has pulled the military to a screeching halt. And then last week, they undermined their own argument. They nominated and confirmed a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, a Commandant of the Marine Corps. So they can do it. They've just chosen not to.
Exactly, Sean. We've been sitting here all week and had, one vote, when we could do one every 2 hours. And I told the Democrats, when I put this hold on, I said, now listen, you can do them one at a time. Just don't get too far behind, because I'm telling you, I'm not changing my mind. So let's go ahead and start vetting these people, bring them one at a time, let people talk about them, and then confirm them or not confirm them. Let's don't hold them back. So I'm getting the blame for Chuck Schumer and Democrats not doing their damn job.
So did this, when they did this last week, they undermined their own argument, right? They confirmed these 3 folks. How did that change the dynamic? Because you proved what the media was telling us couldn't happen wasn't true. How did that change the narrative, if anything?
Well, first of all, I forced their hand, because as a minority minority in the Senate, when you don't have control of the floor, the only way you can get a vote is get 17 senators to sign a petition. You take it to the leader of the Senate, which is Chuck Schumer, say, listen, I'm going to bring this person to the floor. He panicked. He says, I'm not going to let them overshadow me. I'm going to do this one, and I might do 2 more. So it kind of brought out the fact that, well, he said he couldn't do it, but he did. He was able to do these 3. So it kind of broke the narrative that I'm holding all these back. I'm not. I'm just holding all of them back at one time. They can bring them up, and we can have most of them confirmed in a few months if they would just do it. They just don't want to. They're trying to play hardball and let everybody know that they've got control of the floor.
All right, I hope you're enjoying this conversation, but I want to tell you about an organization that is near and dear to me, Delta Rescue. I've talked to you guys about them before. These are the folks that go out there and take care of abandoned animals, dog, cats, you name it. They come into very sad situations and make them very positive. They are the largest care-for-life animal sanctuary in the entire world. This is a no-kill shelter, a super sanctuary, if you will. And for those of us who have rescued pets, I've told you this before, it's always something that you ask, right? Because they'll always say, hey, we have this dog or this cat or whatever here, and it's 30 days or 2 weeks left, and then we gotta move on. And that's just code for we're going to put them down. Delta Rescue, they take care of these animals for life. We're talking food, veterinary care, a place to play and be happy. And these guys rely solely on the contributions of people like me and you. So if you can spare $5, $10, $20, no contribution is too small. They will send you a newsletter, some of the heartwarming stories about their work and what they're doing. So please go to deltarescue.org and see the work that they're doing and do whatever you can to help. deltarescue.org. Join me in going to deltarescue.org and helping them out. So as the clock was ticking on the new chairman, these guys made some pretty serious allegations and about you, saying that you were, giving comfort to our enemies and stuff. How did that make you feel?
Well, first of all, every one of these noms come through my office, and I sit down and talk to them, and we visit. And whether I'm going to vote for them or not, we talk about the good and the bad, and I talk about leadership and those things. I've got to know them pretty well, and I asked them. I said, I've got a hold on your nomination. What do you think about that? Every one of them said, Coach, listen, we'll fill the position. We're just not going to get that promotion. We'll get the job done. You do what you need to do. We'll do what we need to do to keep our military the strongest in the world. And so it makes you feel good. And so it's, it is one of those things where, I have got a lot of backlash, but I'm doing it for the right reason, Sean. I'm doing it for a strong military, and I'm doing it for the country.
But does it, I guess my point is, as someone who's taken a few arrows over the years, and coaching is, you've won some big games, but you've also lost some. Where does this, I don't know that people ever get used to the personal attacks. And when they question your integrity and the reason that you're doing this and the effect that it's having on our readiness and our training, how is that made any difference on you on a personal level?
Well, not really. And as you said, it probably helped me being a head coach in the SEC for so long. I took a lot of flack, but it got a little personal back in June when Chuck Schumer, every day when he opens the floor, he gives about a 5-10 minute talk. He always opened up with me, and I was ridiculous. I was hurting the military. I wasn't doing the right thing. And for a couple of weeks, I just got hammered by the Democrats. And still, Elizabeth Warren came out a couple of days ago and said that, I was holding up readiness. And, this is a person, Elizabeth Warren, has never voted for the NDAA, never voted for a military budget, but I'm holding back readiness for our military. It's just, it's really, it's comical. I know it's a serious matter.
But why don't you what isn't the other option to say, fine, just vote on the policy? Like, if you guys are so you guys are in the majority, vote on the policy, change it.
Exactly. And they asked me, all these media people run around the Capitol, I call them activist journalists because they're all on the Democrat side, but they all, why don't you vote on this? That's what I want. Hey, I don't care if it passes, if it doesn't. If you want a new policy, don't dictate from the White House and the Pentagon. Don't play dictator. Send it over here like we did in 1984, and let's vote on it. And let's play, go either way. It's voted. That's how we do it in this country. We're a constitutional republic where people have a voice on a very controversial subject such as abortion. They should have their representative vote in terms of how they think in their state.
So you mentioned how the Democrats view you. How do your fellow Republican senators and other elected officials view you? Because, on the one hand, I imagine they got to maybe say sometimes the right thing in the press, but sometimes privately. Do their private comments match their public comments? And generally, are they supportive or are they concerned?
Yeah, but most of the Republicans have been good, because they're pro-life. That's what we are as Republicans. We're pro-life. Some of them have a little bit different view in terms of exceptions or the weeks, whatever. But most everybody is pretty close to that. I've had Senator McConnell's came out 2 or 3 times and said he doesn't agree with my opinion. But as they said, it's his opinion. I work for the people of Alabama, Sean. I work for the citizens of this country. I don't work for anybody else up here. And so I take my opinions and take it to the floor. I was the one that started this. And again, I've had a lot of support from the Republican side. I even had some Democrats come over and say, I'm with you on this. I think you're right. So it's going pretty good.
You mentioned the folks of Alabama that you represent. You guys have a lot of the defense industry down there. Number one, what do they think? And number two, do you think that the motivation to permanently move Space Force from at least being in contention in Alabama to Colorado was political payback?
No, it wasn't. Even Joe Biden and some of the people in the Pentagon said that decision had already been made, Sean. To be honest with you, it's just unfortunate. Probably happened about the same time. But I've actually got a couple of generals that are in Huntsville that I'm holding up, and a lot of people say, "Doesn't that bother you?" I said, "Well, it's a team game. I want the strongest military in the world, and everybody's got to go with the same situation. And again, the jobs are getting done, and people are in the military. They're kind of like football coaches. that they have to take care of their business no matter how it goes. They live in tough situations. So, it's unfortunate we have to do this to get the White House and Pentagon to just listen and do the right thing. Run it through Congress. Let's get it over with, and then I'll release my hold, and they can get them all confirmed.
Let me just ask you this before you go. Like, you were a very successful football coach. You did some analysis on TV. When you got here in 2020, after the 2020 election, is this what you thought you'd be fighting about and for? And is this kind of at all what you thought it would be like?
Well, it's been pretty tough because we've been in a minority the whole time. We've got a new White House that, I really don't call it Republican and Democrat up here, Sean. The 3 years I've been here, I call it more people that really love this country and people that want to change this country to something else. And that's what it is. There's some Democrats that believe a lot like I do, but there's a lot on the Democratic side that just want to totally change and transform our country into something that you and I didn't grow up in. And that's not what we're about. We're about a constitution that believes in freedom of speech and the rights of everybody, but they're changing the whole narrative. So it's been kind of tough for me to grasp that, to see our country go in a way that I don't think it should be. I want my kids and grandkids to have the same opportunity that I had growing up. And right now, our country's in a tailspin with the border, the crime, the inflation, the doing away with fossil fuels. This administration has not made one good decision for the betterment of this country. Everything's going the opposite direction.
Last question, I'll let you go because I know your time is tight. Do you see this hold ending? Is this just a stalemate that is going to run through this? Or is there any break that you see within the Department of Defense where they're willing to negotiate at all in terms of this policy on paying for abortion, giving people 30 days leave, et cetera?
I've given them a way out of sending a vote on, let's vote it, and let the people decide it. If they don't do that, if they don't change the policy back, ball's in their court, Sean. I'm not changing my mind. We're not going to have any promotions unless we bring them up one at a time, like we said, and we can do that. And I might do a few more. I might force their hand again here in a few months. But right now, Chuck Schumer's going to have to wake up and smell the roses and do the right thing if he's going to get some promotions through the Pentagon.
Just real quickly, does that include the chief of naval operations?
Yeah. Oh, sure it does. Sure it does. It includes all of them. I'm not changing my mind. They're going to have to do. Now they can bring the chief of naval operations up tomorrow, and we'd vote on it. Again, they can bring them up anytime. They're all ready to go, but they don't want to do it. They don't want to be proven that they can be told what to do. They have not been told no, Sean, in 3 years. This entire administration, the Senate, they have not been told no. And here's a football coach comes up here and said, "Listen, I'm not changing my mind." I don't think they thought I'd do this at the beginning. We're 7 months in. I think they're starting to understand a little bit that I mean what I say.
Yeah. All right, Coach. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us.
All right, Sean. Thank you.
All right, you've heard me talk about the Wellness Company. This is a team of doctors that includes Dr. Peter McCullough, who was out front during the pandemic using treatments like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, when the government was not big on that kind of stuff, right? But they ended up founding this company called the Wellness Company that is committed to helping you take control of your health. We just wanted to tell you about what they've developed. It's a revolutionary supplement called Spike Support Formula, and it was designed to find a combination of ingredients that would help block and dissolve the COVID spike protein, which is in your bloodstream, especially if you've had a bad bout of COVID. And you know what I'm talking about. People who have lost energy, they're sluggish, etc. You know what I'm talking about if you've experienced this. But there's something that you can do right now. If you go and take Spike Support Protein, this will help combat these proteins and get you back to that pre-COVID feeling. So go to twc.health/Spicer. Use code Spicer. You save 15% at checkout. Again, twc.health. So instead of .com, twc.health/Spicer. You get 15% off that order. I want to show you guys what we call debate prep. This is something that Mark Halperin, and in this case, we did it the other day with Governor Scott Walker. You guys remember we might have done it in Milwaukee. This time we did it with Walker before the debate and Jennifer Nassour after the debate. We broke down the highlights, the lowlights, why the needle didn't move, what's next, in a little thing we call debate prep. And I want to show you some of that discussion now because I think it's insightful. we've got a few more. I think we had 12 in the 2015 cycle. We've only had 2 down now. The RNC has that other one scheduled for Miami coming up. As I've said before, everything that I've been told is that NBC is going to be the schedule. But I don't think Univision did us any favors. And we talked about that on yesterday's show. But I want to hear you how we discuss some of these issues that I think are going to be important moving forward for both the candidates and the mechanics of it, meaning both the RNC and the network partners. So take a look.
Good morning. I'm Mark Halperin with Sean Spicer, and we're joined to talk about the post-debate reality with Jennifer Nassour, the former chair of the Massachusetts Republican Party, and who, like Sean and myself, are looking to get our 2 hours back. I can say, based on ample reporting, that this Zoom is already more interesting than last night's debate, and we've barely gotten underway. I've got a bunch of thoughts, and I know you guys too. Jennifer, conventional wisdom was the only winner was Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and TikTok. I'd love your just top line thoughts about who you thought it might have done well last night.
All right. So number one, I'm going to start with this. It was a snooze. I mean, I was trying to get my daughters to watch it with me. And I think it wasn't until Nikki Haley looked at Vivek and said, every time you speak, I'm dumber. Right. I mean, it's like that was the line that finally I was like, oh, wow, that was like a shot of energy, because I think before that, everyone was just sleepy and it wasn't exciting. And then all of a sudden, everyone kind of kicked in to, oh, wait a second, we're debating each other. This is a presidential debate. It's live. But, it really, I think it was very sleepy at the beginning. I don't know if it was the questions. I don't know if everyone was nervous. For me, I'm a Nikki Haley supporter. I think Nikki really did great. And I was listening to one of the talk show hosts later on in the night who said it should be, and the next debate should be between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. That might be a little bit more interesting than what we saw last night.
Maybe some new RNC requirements that unless your name is Nikki or Ron, you can't be in the debate. Sean, what's your top lines? And then I want to talk about the RNC next, because that's an underexplored topic.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm looking forward to talking about that, because I thought it was an embarrassment that Univision was part of that debate. I mean, between Univision hosting it and Gavin Newsom in the spin room, I thought if you closed your eyes and no one told you who the candidates were, you would be convinced that was a Democratic candidate debate. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. I thought the dynamics were interesting. I thought Vivek, clearly, we talked about this on yesterday's call. He came out very humble, talking about, Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment and the respect that he had for the other candidates. And I'm like, did Vivek go home? Because he was much more humble and contrite.
He was for a bit, but then later he loaded the snot back in his nose.
Yeah. But again, I thought, to Jennifer's point, it started slow. Then people got their one-liners in. It was Donald Duck from Chris Christie, Nikki Haley's dumber comment, Pence's comment about Vivek just learning to vote after he got back from China, the TikTok question. But the problem is everyone got their one-liners in, and then it was sort of a food fest, a food fight. I mean, everybody was yelling. The moderator, to me, it was rather embarrassing. And I think, I felt a little bad for Doug Burgum at a certain point, but I'm like, listen, dude, you're basically lucky to be here. So pipe down. But I think until this thing gets down to 4 candidates, it's going to continue the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, here's my bottom line. I thought the reality, and this is why Donald Trump is so far ahead and is almost certainly going to be the nominee. They all did about as well as they could. I don't think you could say they had an off night. I think that's how good the 7 of them are. And that's why beating one of the best presidential political athletes who's ever run for president in the modern era, Donald Trump, has been a challenge from the start.
All right, guys, I know a lot of you are working on taking care of yourself, exercising more, living healthy, but there's something I want to talk to you about. The latest data from the American Heart Association indicates that people who have a fatty liver are 3.5 times, actually more than 3, likely to have heart failure than those without. So you're saying to me, okay, I don't know if I have that or not. Well, let me just give you the stats, because the American Liver Foundation says that as many as 100 million people have a fatty liver. And as disgusting as that might sound, think about all the stuff that you're throwing at your liver: alcohol, toxins, statins, cigarette smoke. So many of the stuff that we do goes through our liver. It actually performs over 500 key ingredients, key functions every day. And so if you have experienced weight gain or loss of energy, it may be because of that. So you can do something about it by taking Liver Health Formula. It's an all-natural supplement that contains 12 clinically proven botanicals. It's manufactured here in the U.S. Over 2 million bottles have already been sold. So you can go try Liver Health Formula and get a free bottle of omega-3s, which will help your heart. So you're working the heart and the liver. Go to getliverhelp.com/Spicer. You get a free bonus gift, that omega-3s. If you do that, go to getliverhealth.com/Spicer. Start taking care of your liver just like you're taking care of your body with the exercise and all this stuff.
I want to skip to the RNC thing just because I think you'll both be super interesting on that. And I do think it's an underexplored topic. We'll come back and talk a bit more about the debate, of course. So as you said, Sean, if Rachel Maddow had been one of the moderators, it wouldn't have been much different. No. And I don't think the ratings are going to be high. The candidates themselves are clearly frustrated, but they also behaved not in a very polite way. I mean, they broke the rules repeatedly. So you both have been involved with the RNC. Sean, you obviously were involved in playing the debates. What should the RNC do going forward to make this? And of course, the biggest thing is they're not attracting their front runner. This seems to me to be a disaster for the RNC.
So two things. Number one, I think they've done a good job of getting the requirements in. I think by upping it to 4%, you're going to winnow the field a little bit, which it should be. I mean, we've gotten past it. We're now going to be 3 months out from the next debate from the Iowa caucuses. If you're at 4%, you ain't going to be the nominee. That's the bottom line. So grow up, let everybody have their turn.
But who does that winnow besides Burgum?
Well, I think potentially, I think there's a bunch of these guys that, I mean, Tim Scott or Chris Christie, I mean, they may be on the bubble, but they may play to the early state thing. I don't know. But the point is just getting rid of a couple and getting it down so that over 2 hours. But hold on. Here you asked. Well,
I think your premise is wrong. I think
okay, then fine. Then maybe
Burgum could spend his way to 4%,
sure,
and then everybody's going to be in it again.
Okay, but here's the problem. I mean, you asked me what the RNC could do. It already set the criteria for the third debate at 4%. They're stuck with that. They can't go out and change it again. But the reality is, I think that's number one. Number two is the number of moderators. I get that this is not, I mean, of all the parties, we're playing like, make sure that there's equal DEI representation on the panel stage. Get down to one moderator. Mike Huckabee had a great suggestion. Everybody gets equal time, 10 minutes across the thing, and you work your time down every time you start to talk. I don't know that that's the best answer, but it's better than what happened last night. And number two is put a conservative at the moderator table who actually cares about issues that matter. I get the point of Univision and reaching out into the party. I'm all about growing the party in a general election. This is a primary. We're picking the nominee of the Republican Party, and not one question that was taken up by Univision will further anyone who's voting in a Republican primary or caucus's mind up. So let's get away with trying to play pretty, make nice during the primary. Let's get the best nominee that conservatives can rally around and then worry about the general election.
All right, before Jennifer, I want to ask you what you would tell the chairwoman of the RNC to do to fix this mess. But Sean, name your moderator. You pick. Who should moderate the debate?
Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck. Anybody that actually has a pulse on what voters, primary voters and caucus, Sean Spicer, I'll do it. I'm willing to do it. But okay. My point is that this is the idea that there's a woman from Univision, and no offense, again, I'm for including Univision as we get to general elections, but this is not one person at Univision has their pulse. They asked about DACA and CRT and DEI. There's not a Republican voter in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, in the most liberal places that actually going to vote in a primary that cares about a single issue that was brought up last night by
and not just asked about those topics, but asked about them in a way that was very freighted and framed again the way they would from a left point of view. What would you tell the chairwoman?
So first of all, I agree with Sean. Univision shouldn't have been there. It was almost confusing. And I feel like they, Dana and, I think they kind of lost control with the partnership with Univision. And I also think everyone was really disrespectful, right? And I think that's what I would say to Rana is, if they're going to be disrespectful, the only one who actually abided by her time was Nikki. There was that crossfighting with Tim Scott, and he kind of did something that was kind of gross and beneath him. And, that was a kind of yucky exchange. But I think that there should be some sort of penalty, hey, listen, if you're not going to abide by the time, you're going to have to pay the RNC. give the RNC $10,000 for every second you go over. That should actually shut everyone up, right? Because money talks, and their donors are not going to be happy when they're going over their time and then they have to give the RNC money. I think that there has to be, and I think also the metrics need to change. I totally think that at this point, listen, Mike Pence, nice guy. Chris Christie, I love Chris. He comes here a lot. Burgum, he could buy his way up the percentage poll. Tim Scott, you've seen your day. Whittle down the field, because at the end of the day, yes, Donald Trump is the one with the largest percentage. If we keep going on this trajectory, no one can eat into his percentage. They're only eating into each other's percentages, and we need to point it down.
Jennifer, the thing is, I'm a fan of winning the field, but when you look at where these guys are percentage wise, if you're Tim Scott or Mike Pence, I appreciate your transparency on where you are on Nikki, but at the end of the day, what is she, 1-2% higher in a couple of, you're
that's
if
the
I
problem.
were them,
That's the problem.
I would say, wait a second, why does she get it? Because she's, at 7 and I'm at 6. There's not a huge disparity. All these guys, it's a massive car crash around 8, 9, 10%. And, you look at the when you factor in margin of error in the polls, they can argue, I could theoretically be ahead of you. And I get it. I want a smaller field to see these guys one-on-one a little bit more. But the reality is that everybody, even the second place person, is at 13, 14%. This isn't like anyone's close to touching Trump right now.
So what do we do though? So then it continues to be this cluster, right, of all these people on the stage, all trying to get attention, 2-hour-long debate. I'm sorry, I'm on the East Coast, like you are. I'm up and I'm like trying to hold my eyeballs open, right? And drink coffee at 11 o'clock at night just to get through the end of it. I don't think that that's fair to us. And if the most important thing, and the thing I see happen over and over and over again, especially in our blue states, people do not come out in the primaries. They are not voting. In Massachusetts, the Democrats keep winning elections here because 20% of the voters come out and they vote in the primary, and then that liberal person who's off the charts ends up winning as governor, as mayor, over and over because people don't come out. So if we are not telling the voters, here are your choices and you need to come out and vote, then we're just stuck with whoever it is at the end. And it might be Trump, but that's not democracy. I want democracy to work.
One quick point. The goal of the debates, and you just articulated this, is to inform voters to make a decision. We've now had 2 debates. These guys have done a ton of television and advertising. At some point, part of the conclusion might be that they have made up their mind, right? Trump's numbers aren't moving, and these guys are all car crashed around 8, 9. At some point, we can argue that it should happen, but voters on the Republican side in Iowa and New Hampshire, this is what they do. They pay particular attention to this. They kick the tires of the candidates. I was at the Iowa State Fair. These guys are unbelievably engaged. And so at some point, maybe they have sent their message, that they have looked at the candidates and they made their decision.
Yeah. Look, the RNC's got that one other debate on the schedule. They haven't formally announced who the media partners are going to be. We don't know who the questioners are going to be. None of the other debates are scheduled. And I think they're going to have a challenge. And I had thought before President Trump would be under pressure to go to the debates on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire. Now, the press has kind of normalized him skipping these. They've kind of applauded him for being smart to skip them. So I had thought he would have to do those. I'm not even sure he's going to have to do those. I'm wondering what you guys think of that.
I agree.
Listen, he doesn't, to what Sean was saying, his percentages don't move at all. And so why would he go? I think if he goes, he sets himself up for DeSantis and for Christie and for Pence to just continue to beat him up. The one thing I will say is, an election, a campaign is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's dating. It's finding out information about someone. Do you like them? Do you want to marry them? And at the end of the day, and I'm just going to put my party chair hat on, I want to win elections. Who is going to beat Joe Biden? Because it's not Joe Biden that we're running against. It's Kamala Harris, because Joe Biden is going to get in there and he's going to either die or he's going to be deemed mentally unfit, and it's going to be Kamala. So who is going to beat them? And the fact that the Democrats really would like to get in their first female minority president, and that's the only thing they're concerned about, because Joe Biden is a complete failure.
Hey, Mark, can I just make a quick Zoom PSA? If you have a question, go into the chat, submit it. We're there's folks on Zoom. You feel free to ask a question, and we'll see if we can get to it. I apologize.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, okay. I want to go back to candidates in the debate in a second, but I want to make a proposal. I used to work on trying to schedule formats. When I worked at ABC with different anchors, right? And particularly if you've got a big field. So how about this for the format to solve a couple of the RNC's problem, to keep the candidates from feeling like they're not getting enough time, to keep the moderator role as limited as possible, and to get the conversation focused on substance in an interesting way. You take the candidates in either pairs or in three at a time, and you say, okay, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, talk about what your ideas on the economy for 4 minutes, go. And just let the three of them, and you produce it and direct it in a way that it's compelling television, and you let the three of them have a conversation on the economy. That way, it's two or three at a time. It's better substantively, and then they can decide if they want to make a gladiatorial moment and take it on. They can. How about that for an idea?
I love that. I think you should be the moderator, and I think you should give that suggestion over the RNC.
All right. When we're done, the three of us
Mark,
call the
Governor
RNC.
Huckabee. When I asked Governor Mike Huckabee on my show about this, he said exactly a version of what you're saying. He said, I would suggest every candidate on the stage gets, divide the 2 hours up, and then the moderator throws out a topic, the economy, China.
The problem doing it his way is then all 7 or 6 or 5, whatever, all try to get in on every topic. My way, you have.
But the beauty is, but the beauty of his suggestion is, as soon as you run out of time, your mic is cut. So you have to be, you have to think about choosing your moments, right? Yeah. So your point is, they all fight over the 4 minutes. But if you said, hey, you have a clock, it's 12 minutes or whatever. Every time you talk, that clock ticks down. So you have to choose your moments. If you want to get into a food fight with 4 other candidates for 30 seconds, you're down to 9:30. Another 20 seconds.
The flaw in that to me is, you can bait somebody into wasting their time. You say to Tim Scott, when did you stop beating your girlfriend? And then he's got to defend himself, and he eats up his time playing defense. I want to talk about opposition research and how it's used in debates. And this will be important in the future debates, particularly if Donald Trump ever does show up. You saw last night some clear Oppo dumps, some Oppo drops, right? Nikki Haley's curtains, the question of whether Ron DeSantis banned fracking, stuff about Vivek's business, right? Vivek. It seemed to me those are good research things, but it showed what amateurs they all are. You can't just drop it out there with no context and then expect it to have any impact. You read all the stories today, barely any mentions, or watch the cable news coverage afterwards, barely any mentions of those hits. I'm just so amazed that these people are playing at this level, and they're dropping this perfectly good Oppo that could do some damage, and then it disappears into the ether. And I'm wondering what you both think about that, and whether that speaks to, again, how these operations are not all that good.
So let me give you a little morning quote of the day here. Sun Tzu, tactics without strategy is just noise. I actually butchered the quote, but that's not the point. The point is that, when I talk to press secretaries, I do training sessions, I go, don't put the secretary in press secretary. Tactics are a release, a tweet, a speech, a video. Those are tactics, the same as dropping Oppo. If you don't have a strategy to amplify it, then you're just shooting into the dark. And so you're right. These guys should have set the tee up. They should have been out the night before, dropping a video where it got into the ether, and then everyone's talking about it. And they say, you've seen the video that went viral today. How do you answer?
None of that. They did none of that.
And they give the opportunity of the opponent, whether it was Nikki, to respond and say, boom, 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 boom. And they combated it right away. They weren't on defense. They didn't use this Oppo correctly. And I'm glad you're pointing this out.
I read, I think in Politico that, in fact, something I didn't know, Ron DeSantis seems to have banned fracking. At least that's what I read. But Ron DeSantis is not today on defense for having banned fracking. Nikki Haley's not on defense for her curtains, which seems not to be true. But again, if Tim Scott wants to make a big deal of her curtains, he's got to, as you said, Sean, you got to tee it up. You got to amplify it. You got to tie it to some broader thing. And I'll say again, presidential campaigns I've covered, Al Gore, not the greatest politician of all time, but when he had a piece of Oppo, he knew how to use it. He knew how to make it part, as you said, of a larger strategy. Are there any questions teed up?
I want to get, Paul's got a question, but before we get to Paul, Jennifer, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah. So, the one thing, I mean, I've been in politics for a very, 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 very long time, and learned from some of the best in Nassau County, New York. And when I became party chair here, I had an amazing election with Scott Brown. And then I ran right into statewide elections. I had so much Oppo research, and we would, and this is at a time before there was even, Twitter and the whole, universe, you could get it out in that way. We would start dropping things, dropping little hints with the press, getting it out there, telling our activists before anything ever happened. So that way, as soon as Scott was on stage, as soon as Charlie Baker was on stage, that information was already there. And they were prepared themselves for what their opponent was going to say. And being able to be armed with that is so powerful. And I think one of the things I always used to say, and I still tell my staff, is I don't want to run into a fire drill of an actual fire, right? I want to be prepared. I want to know what's coming down. As soon as the fire happens, it's too late for the drill, right? That's not the time you want the drill.
Yeah. But even their hits on Trump, right? They say, well, Donald Trump didn't build the wall. Lay some groundwork, have a strategy. Don't just blurt out Donald Trump didn't build the wall. It's amateur hour. Sean.
Paul, do you have a question, or I can read it? I'll give you a second. I can't tell if we've brought him in.
Is Paul able to ask the question himself?
I'm going to see if we can do that. So Paul's question is, who drops out of the race next and when? So let me just, I think Doug Burgum drops out of the race when they don't let him come to the next debate.
Maybe, although I still think he'll buy his way in.
I mean, look, if you're okay, so then the question is, if not, Paul's question is who drops out of the race next and when. I think the obvious answer, and I agree with you, the guy can spend enough money, can keep spending money to buy himself 1% more in a national poll. But who beyond that? I don't see anyone else.
Of the people on the stage, except for maybe Burgum, just decides he's sick of spending his kids' inheritance. The one person, ironically, who I think is the most likely to get out before Iowa is Ron DeSantis, because I think he may not have any money left. His super PAC might have money, but I think he may get to November and not be able to afford to fly his state troopers around on private planes and have to drop out. And
well, the other thing is
his career. I don't think
I was going to say the other. You saw he had a big loss at the state party the other day in terms of the rules governing how which was a big win for President Trump going into this. So I say that because you're right. At some point, does he save his Florida career and say, I'm still the governor?
Exactly.
That's and use the excuse of I've got to deal with, all of these issues in Florida. Jennifer.
Absolutely. Listen, I think in Florida, he did a great job. He's been doing a great job as governor, other than some transparency issues I have with him of late. But I think for the most part, he has a stellar record as governor. And I think if he continues, it's an ego thing, right? And I totally agree, Mark. All of the speculation, and I have a bunch of DeSantis friends up here, all the speculation is that he's running out of money. His donors are starting to move. They're looking at other candidates. They've been looking at Nikki a lot. And so I think that DeSantis needs to figure it out soon. Listen, he's got a young family. He has a wife that just went through breast cancer. He could use any excuse in the world,
exactly.
Family excuse or being governor in his career to get out of this thing.
Exactly. And look, he's traveling a ton to raise money. It's a huge suck on his time. But I'm hearing about the events that they're not very big. There's no indication his grassroots fundraising is very good. As for the question for the others, Vivek, time of his life, raising enough money to keep going, doesn't have a big infrastructure. Nikki Haley, lean operation, more fundraising coming in. Tim Scott, maybe Tim Scott could get out. I guess I'd say it's possible Tim Scott could get out, but he's got a big super PAC as well. And again, kind of enjoying it and not working all that hard at it, actually. So it's not a huge tax on his daily life compared to a normal campaign. Pence, this is it. Last go round. Again, doesn't need a lot of money to run. Christie, counting on New Hampshire. So I think, and no one, here's the thing. If DeSantis was at 32 and Trump was at 48 or 45, people in the party would pressure these other folks to get out. You can't go to Nikki Haley or Tim Scott now and say, hey, for the good of the party, get out so we can consolidate around X, because there is no X.
Right.
So
Jeff,
how do you get him out?
Jeff,
Question from Jeff. Jeff, you're unmuted, I think. Go ahead.
Yes, my question is, it just struck me as ironic and a contradiction that you have 7 candidates on the stage. One of the themes is law and order, yet you have a front runner who's under 91 indictments and has been found liable of sexual assault. Having a question like that in that event struck me as quite ironic, and no one seemed to react to it.
Jeff, before my colleagues react, I want your honest view. Is this Zoom more interesting than the debate or not?
Absolutely.
All right, just making sure. Jennifer, what do you think of that notion of that's a vulnerability that really neither the moderators nor the candidates really went after?
I think that it's a really good question, Jeff. And that's something that, you know, it's the elephant in the room, right? It's the big orange elephant in the room. Why aren't we talking about that? If we're the party of law and order, why aren't we talking about all of Donald Trump's indictments? Why aren't we talking about the comments that he's made? Why don't we talk about the attack on democracy? And that's not happening. And again, it's almost like everyone's giving Donald Trump a free pass because he's not there on stage. And then they just end up fighting. But I agree, it should have come out.
And even Chris Christie is not really drilling that. He's talking about other aspects of Trump, right?
Yeah, look, I think that there's, I mean, to Jeff's question, why? Well, first of all, the law and order thing, we talked about this on yesterday's call in terms of what issues we thought would come up. And I believe crime is in light of Target closing all these stores and some of the viral videos that we've seen of people looting and smashing windows. There is a sense among Republican voters, and we see it all the time now in these videos, in these newscasts about what's happening on the streets, Democrats defunding the police, et cetera. And I think for a lot of voters, they bifurcate the crime, the defund the police, what we're seeing in the cities, and an attack on Trump, which a lot of voters view as a weaponization of the judicial system. And
exactly,
right or wrong, I mean, this is what Jeff's asking, I think, is they don't, and the candidates know this. I mean, there's a reason Chris Christie and these guys are willing to go to the line and say Trump should be here and defend his record, but they get that, what, 60% of the Republican base right now believes that the judicial system is weaponized against Donald Trump, and the reason they're going after him is to prevent him from winning, and da-da-da-da. So everybody is getting that. And I think the moderators got it. They didn't want to get backlash for this, especially at Fox. I think the candidates understand where that balance is. And frankly, I think the voters have literally bifurcated this issue of crime.
Jeff, that's the answer. The voters don't want it, and they're not suicidal. But you got to assume that maybe they should just take a risk, do what's right. They all think it in their heart. Maybe they just take a risk and try to shape public opinion rather than running from it and being captive to it. If there's one more question, I'd love you to tee it up. But I do want to follow up one thing from yesterday. I believe all three of us, me, you, Sean, and Scott Walker, we all predicted topics that would come up. One of you said crime. One of you said immigration. Those were easy. Those were obvious. So I'm declaring myself the winner because I said TikTok. Not as obvious, and that was asked. So I won that. So I'm not sure what it is I win. Do we have another question?
Nice. That you didn't give us any context of the question saying pick a hard issue. You said pick an issue. I picked an issue. But I agree. The thing that I found was interesting, by the way, just to your point, and I'll give you credit for at least picking it up, is I thought it was a good hit. I thought going after Vivek on TikTok and the hypocrisy of it. I mean, I'm sorry, his answer, like I agree with Governor Haley on this. It is a threat to our national security. Republicans have taken the right stand in trying to ban TikTok and protect the country. And yet he used his desire to win as an excuse. I mean, frankly, as a conservative, that's what I've always said about the Democrats, that they will say and do whatever they need to win in pursuit of what they deem the greater good. This was Vivek basically siding with them. And I was actually, I was proud that she brought it up because I do think it's a huge, hypocritical response.
It'd be like saying we need to rob banks and buy kids free root beer so they'll vote for us so we can win the election, and then we'll stop robbing banks and we'll.
Right.
I mean, it was just insane. Do we have another question?
We have Daniel. Daniel, can you? I'm trying to think the team. We're trying to unmute Daniel's question because I know. Let's see if they're bringing him in. All right, I read it, so I could. But basically, Daniel said, "What do you think about the DeSantis?" Oh wait, he's here. Daniel.
Daniel, do you have a very quiet voice, or you're not actually there? All right, Sean, go ahead and read
All
it.
right. So Daniel's question was, what do you think about the DeSantis approach of just let them eat cake, was what he asked.
I don't even know what that means. Jennifer, you have any idea what that means? It's about cake, so it's a good question.
I love cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really.
I don't know.
I didn't
All right,
understand.
It's a stupendous way to end this meeting. Jennifer, if you were writing a newspaper headline for last night's debate, what would you say?
I would say, snooze fest, right? That's where I would start.
That'd be the Boston Herald headline.
That would, right, exactly. That would be the Herald, Herald headline.
Sean, what would your newspaper headline be?
Commercials dominate Republican debate.
Like the Super Bowl. Jennifer, mine would be Jennifer's daughter's never interested in politics again. Thanks to RNC. All right, Jennifer, thank you for joining us. And everybody who watched, thank you. If you want to see a replay of this or share it with all your friends, you can go to Sean's YouTube channel. It'll be posted there through the magic of something momentarily. And we may well see you at the next debate, where we're grateful to you all for making time. And Jennifer, Sean, great to spend 30 minutes with you both.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
See you in a month.
All right. Well, thank you for being part of this conversation today. And also for all of you who have been so supportive of the show. I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot to me. When you're doing this form of independent media, this is what it's all based on, right? How many people are subscribing, how much support you have. So thank you, especially if you're on Apple Podcast and YouTube. A lot of times people ask me why. Those are the two big metrics that people look at. Yes, I know some of you watch it on Rumble. I appreciate everyone who's watching on the First. Thank you. It's great to be with you. But even if you are, could you please go to Apple Podcasts? Just hit the subscribe button. If you want to give 5 stars for a review, that's greatly appreciated as well. And on YouTube, just add to that subscription so that you get all of these. And you never know what's going to happen in terms of censorship these days. So it's always good to have it covered, but it does help us. So thank you. I really appreciate it. But I enjoyed both of these conversations today. The thing about the Tuberville conversation was, and I said this at the beginning, this is not what the media is telling you. And it drives me nuts sometimes where I sit there and want to throw things at the screen or throw my phone, but I can't because I can't, it has to cost too much to replace it. But this is the problem. These guys, and I said this before about, impeachment and judges and all this, these guys changed the policy, DOD policy. You get 30 days of leave in the military. And they're giving 30 days now on their own without going through Congress, because they want to make sure that if you want to go have an abortion, you can have 30 days of leave. 30 days of leave. I don't get that. That's the most backwards thing that you're telling. I mean, it's almost like you're incentivizing it, aren't you? You're paying for their travel and giving them 30 days of leave. It's disgusting, but it's true. And they did it without going through Congress. If they're so proud of this, they have a majority in the Senate. Go pass it. You don't get to pick and choose what laws that you want to follow. And then, by the way, when you don't, get mad at the senator for saying, great, change the policy back or bring it to a vote. But they undermine their own argument. Chuck Schumer did it when he allowed the votes to go through. You heard Senator Tuberville say it really clearly. They want to pass these things. They can do it one at a time. Allow them to be scrutinized. They just can't do them 200 at a time. Look, there are consequences. I get it. And that was kind of what I tried to say to him. There are people that have waited their whole life to make flag, to be a general officer. It's horrible that they're caught up in this. And I truly feel bad. I know some of these individuals. But the Department of Defense and this administration chose a policy that should have gone through Congress and didn't, and they knew it. So all they have to do is undo that policy. That's it. It all goes away. We're doing one by one. As we head into the weekend, by the time we reconvene on Monday, the government will be shut down. So we'll have a lot to talk about when we meet back again on Monday. So a lot to break down, some great guests to be with. And thank you again for all your support. Please take the time over the weekend to enjoy yourself, but also that 10, 20 seconds. Just subscribe, go to Apple Podcasts, go to YouTube, subscribe, Rumble, whatever it is. Thank you for all your support. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday. Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.